Hello all, welcome to the live session of Narayana IAS Academy. The topic that we've actually taken up today for discussion is heat waves as disaster. So this particular article will actually be discussed in terms of the conceptual clarity that we actually require for the topic of heat waves, as there has been a question on heat domes already asked in the mains examination. And moving forward, we'll actually discuss about, since there is the ongoing spells of heat waves for a persistent or a consistent amount of time in different parts of the country, why is there a necessity in order to include this particular heat wave as a notified disaster under the Disaster Management Act? So this is what we'll actually be discussing here. So initially, we'll actually look into what are the areas of discussion. First is on the heat waves, and the next one is the Disaster Management Act, which is very important. And this particular topic can actually be mapped to GS paper 3 under environment, pollution and degradation and disaster management for the mains examination. So moving forward, if you actually look at the previous year question, there was a question which was asked in the mains examination in the year 2013 on the causes as well, for the formation of heat islands in the urban habitat of the world. So from here, our takeaway is that this particular topic is a very important topic for discussion, specifically for the mains examination. So moving forward, let us understand what this particular article which has been picked up today is speaking about. Okay, so the ongoing spell of extreme heat in many parts of the country has actually reopened or ignited the necessity of discussion on the inclusion of heat waves as one of the notified disasters under this DMA, that is the Disaster Management Act of 2005. So before going into the details of what is the necessity of including heat waves as a notified disasters and what is the special status that it will actually have in case of accessibility of funds as well as management, let us understand this particular concept of what heat waves are. Okay, so let us understand what is this concept of heat waves is. Okay, so here heat waves can actually be explained in two terms. One, qualitatively. Qualitatively, it can be defined as a condition of air temperature that actually becomes very fatal when the human body is exposed to. So that is called as heat wave qualitatively. And if we have to describe it quantitatively, it is based on the temperature thresholds that is actually persistent or that exist in a particular region in terms of actual temperature. That is, to be very simple, if there is any kind of departure from the normal temperature, that particular situation or condition is declared as heat wave. For example, let us see, if it is called as the heat wave if the departure from the normal temperature is actually exceeding around 4.5 to 6.5 degrees Celsius. This is called as a heat wave condition. Or if there is a departure beyond 6.5 degrees, then it is called as severe heat wave. And in terms of, actual temperature, then if it actually exceeds greater than or equal to 45 degrees is called as heat wave, and beyond 47 degrees it is actually called as severe heat wave. So if this condition is actually persistent in any two of the meteorological divisions of India for consecutive 2 days, then the second day there is actually declaration of heat wave condition. Okay, so this is what is actually the definition of what heat waves are. So now looking into the causes of heat waves, there can be different causes of heat waves. The first one is the existing high pressure system. So how does high pressure actually result in the formation of heat waves is that high pressure is nothing but it is referred to as the heat dome. So what is this heat dome? This is the accumulation or the persistent or the continuous presence of high pressure in the region in the form of heat dome, which is stationary over a region. This actually leads to sinking of air and clear skies, and this actually prevents any kind of release of heat from the region. So this actually traps more heat near the surface of the region. So this, in case, increases the temperature resulting in heat waves. The second can actually be the emission of the greenhouse gases. Okay, and the next one can also be the land use changes of late, as well as rapid urbanization which is actually happening, And because of urbanization, we actually have the infrastructure like roads, concrete buildings, etc., which are very, very high in concentration. That is why it is called as the urban concrete jungles, which actually retain more heat, and there is lack of vegetation. So what happens is that it results in the formation of urban heat islands, thereby resulting in heat waves. Next can be the phenomenon of drought, as well as lack of precipitation. And finally, El Nino, that is, the warming of the eastern Pacific Ocean, can also affect the global weather patterns, including the temperature, the rainfall, as well as the wind patterns. Okay, so all these are actually the causes of the heat waves across the globe. Now, apart from the causes, now it is actually important for us to discuss about what are the impacts of heat waves. Okay, so impacts can be manifold, but here we'll actually discuss about three. Okay, one is actually called the economic impacts. Here it can be, in terms of reduced labor productivity, or it can be energy systems can actually be strained because there is, increased use of, air conditioners that can actually, release in, there can be an increase in, the greenhouse gas emissions. Next can be the agricultural damage. Moving on, apart from the economic impacts, the other impact can be ecological impacts. So what can be the ecological impacts is that there can be scarcity of water. So water scarcity can be one. The next one is there can be increased wildfire risks, and also there can be wildlife and ecosystem stress. So this is the impact of heat wave. Apart from the economic impacts as well as ecological impacts, there are other impacts like health as well as social impacts, where majorly it results in increased mortality. It can result in affecting the vulnerable sections of the population more when compared to the others, because they actually lack access to the air conditioning and other affordabilities like primary health care that other people do. And also there is heat related illness like heat strokes, etc. So now, as we actually have understood what is this particular concept of heat waves is all about, now let us actually get into the news and understand what are these notified disasters. Okay, so notified disasters, 1 minute. So what are notified disasters? So notified disasters under the Disaster Management Act of 2005 are specific categories of catastrophes that actually qualify for funding and management. Okay, so if any particular kind of disaster, whether the earthquake or tsunami or floods or avalanche, is actually included or notified as notified disasters under DM Act, then they can actually accrue or they can reach the NDRF funds and SDRF funds for management as well as the funding. Okay, so this is what is called as notified disasters. Next one, these disasters are defined as events that cause significant loss of human life, material, economic as well as environmental losses. Okay, so here what happens is that this actually exceeds the ability of the normal systems that actually function in order to cope up with the own resources. If we are not able to cope up with the own resources, then we had to actually have need the help of the NDRF and the SDRF funds. And currently, if you see, there are 12 categories of disasters which are actually notified under this act. Especially you can see the catastrophes like cyclones, droughts, earthquake, fire, flood, tsunamis, hailstorms, landslides, avalanche, cloudburst, pest attack and frost and cold waves are all declared as notified disasters. Now let us see what is the implication or what is the requirement of notifying a disaster as notified disaster. Is that when a particular disaster is actually a notified disaster under the DM Act, it allows the affected states to access the funds from the NDRF, which stands for the National Disaster Response Fund, and the SDRF, that is the State Disaster Response Fund, in order to manage as well as mitigate the disaster's effect and the loss that it has actually resulted in. And these funds are actually intended to be used for response, relief, as well as rehabilitation purposes, that is RRR purposes. And the states generally actually use this SDRF resources first, and then in case if they are not sufficient and if their need actually exceed the current value that was given, then they actually ask the the NDRF. Next one, this structure actually ensures the financial resources are actually available in order to support the immediate response as well as the recovery efforts. Now moving on, why the heat waves were actually not included as notified disasters, and what are the challenges or the limitations that the central government actually faced with respect to that. Let us actually see. So heat waves were originally not included as the notified disasters because they were actually considered as very regular summer occurrences rather than unusual and extreme events or catastrophes when the DM Act was initially formulated in the year 2005. So that time it was actually not a big catastrophe as it is actually seen currently. So historically, heat waves did not appear to exceed the coping capacity of the affected communities in the way it is affecting today and in the way the other disasters actually affected them. Next one, however, if you see the increasing frequencies, the intensity and the severity of the spells of the heat waves actually occurring attributed to climate change, this has actually changed the perception, and that is why it is necessary for including the heat waves in the category of notified diseases. And now there is now greater recognition of the risk and the impacts associated with the heat waves, including health crisis like we have the heat strokes, and then this actually disproportionately affects the vulnerable populations and those who are actually working outdoors. Now moving forward, why has the center not added heat waves as a notified disaster? First one is the financial implications that they might actually face. That is, recognizing heat waves as notified disaster can actually strain the financial resources of the government. How? This is because the Act mandates the compensation for the deaths and the injuries which are caused by such disasters. That is, the DM Act actually says that if there is any kind of death or any kind of injury that has been caused by any 12 of the notified disasters, then you need to give the compensation. And so the central government is very apprehensive of the financial strain that this particular inclusion will actually cause. So given that potentially high number of heat related fatalities are there and the ambiguity in directly attributing deaths to the heat waves, this could impose a substantial financial burden on the government. The second reason why the center is actually apprehensive of including this is the practical challenges. Okay, so there are practical difficulties whether the death should be directly attributed to the heat waves, as heat often exacerbates the pre-existing health conditions also. If you already have any other conditions like sepsis, etc., heat is just an additional factor to exacerbate, and that will result in your mortality. And this one complicates the process of officially recording these as heat wave specific fatalities. And moving forward, looking at what does the Finance Commission actually has to say on this is that the previously constituted 3 finance commissions have actually not supported adding heat waves to the list of these notified disasters. They actually say that existing provisions actually sufficiently cover state needs for the disaster response. And however, they have also allowed the states in order to, set aside certain amount or a percentage like 10% of funds in order to accrue to these particular needs. Now moving forward, looking at the conclusion in what, how we need to end a particular answer in case a question is asked, or how to end a topic, is that we already know now the heat waves are actually, in the limelight, and since the ongoing spells are very, very persistent and consistent, we need to say that some states have begun to classify heat waves already as local disaster using the enabling provisions created by the Finance Commission in order, or which allows to allocate around 10% of their SDRF allocations for managing such events. And this reflects a This reflects a growing acknowledgement of the threat which is posed by this particular catastrophe, even as they are not yet recognized as a national disaster under the DM Act. So this is the topic that we have actually dealt with in the live session today. For much more regular updates as well as live sessions, please do like, share and subscribe to Narayana IAS Academy YouTube channel.